And we're live with a special guest, a cat with a guardian. That's the proper word these days.
Exactly. Hello.
And we're going to be going through an episode. So over to Jeff to give us a little introduction to the episode while I put the screen grabs on.
All right. Well, we're taking a detour from our usual reviews of Homicide because we're doing a crossover. So this is actually Law and Order, Season 9, Episode 14, entitled Sideshow, written by Renee Balser and directed by Ed Sheeran, and originally aired February 17th, 1999. And I'm going to read this brief rundown of the plot and then turn it over to Ben to give his thoughts, and then we'll go from there. When Briscoe and Curtis discover that a high-level federal official found murdered in Battery Park was recently transferred from Baltimore, they team up with Baltimore homicide detectives Shepard and Munch. The joint investigation reveals that the victim was involved in a love affair with another high-level government official whose career will be destroyed if the relationship becomes public. The independent counsel summons McCoy and his Baltimore counterpart, Ed Danvers, to Washington and demands that McCoy reveal his source or be jailed for contempt. Briscoe and Curtis apprehend the suspect, but the FBI claims jurisdiction, and the suspect evades trial, if not justice. So that's all that's written on that. Ben, what'd you think?
Well, got a few things written down. There was just one little bit of poor writing where it was like, they had that bit where, is he called Sam Warburton, the actor that plays?
Waterston.
Waterston.
Yeah.
Right, there was a bit when he mentioned immunity, and then he told other lawyers what immunity means. And I'm thinking, they don't need to know that. That's
for the audience benefit, clearly.
Yeah, I know, but it's like, usually, I've read a thing in Robert McKee where if you want the audience to know something, what usually happens is you turn exposition into ammunition. So it's like where somebody's using a bit of information against another character. And in the process, the audience learns some information.
Morgan made a comment as we were watching it about characters rattling off exposition in the dialogue, like when they arrested the one guy who was like the relative of the suspect, and he just rattles off all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's because Law and Order always moves at that pace where it's like if they don't do that, then they're never going to get that information out. So that's the only way they can do it. Even though it's probably not too realistic that the character really would have said all that in that situation. I don't know. Some people are that much of a snitch, I guess you could say, in terms of what they say when they get taken by the police. So it's not entirely unrealistic that could happen.
There was one little bit that was a little bit poor, like when they had the black lesbian shot. I think because it was at such close range that they couldn't use a blank, but like that sound effect of the bullet sounded really fake. What do you think of that, Bradley and Jeff? Do you think that it sounded fake, that bullet?
The entire scene was suspect to me.
Well, so it doesn't say that. To me, the faker thing is that at that close range, in that situation, he's going to like put it all the way up against her and do that. Like there's not like the effect on him of that. You know what I mean? Like of the gun physically.
Yeah, I mean, Morgan mentions that a lot, doesn't he? Like, why take the risk of the person taking the gun off you?
Anyway. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a nitpick, but it was effective in the sense that it was a surprise.
Yeah.
Even watching this again, because I've seen it before and I still didn't remember that happening. So,
do you think they tried to make it a little bit like the Jack Ruby thing with the assassination?
Yeah, that's immediately what I thought of. Yeah. It was very much like that. Yeah, I'm surprised Munch didn't even say anything like that. I mentioned that, but.
Bradley and Joe might not know about the Jack Ruby thing. I don't know. Do you know about the Jack Ruby thing with?
I'm not familiar.
It was Lee Harvey Oswald who assassinated JFK was himself assassinated by Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby. Okay, now I remember.
Oh.
And
Okay.
apparently what happened is it was like that, where it was like really close, and there was like short-range gunshots.
Yeah, so what happened in this episode, for Joe's benefit, is that the murder suspect was apprehended, and somehow it leaked that she was being transported from New York to D.C., and so a guy intercepted and shot her before she could be put in the car to go on the way there. So
Yeah, and apparently the woman was the lesbian lover of a woman that he was infatuated with.
yeah, it gets kind of convoluted if you think about all of the like, and she was married to the other guy that was the, it's just like on every person they mentioned, it was like some position in the government. So then this independent counsel guy is like, he wants to dig up dirt on every single person in any way affiliated with the government. So
Right, so Jeff, who does this guy remind you of in real life? The
well,
counsel.
obviously they were trying to make him Ken Starr.
Yep.
Was that his name?
Yep.
Yeah, they were trying to make him almost he pretty much was supposed to be Ken Starr, but
Yeah. This is about a year
they even mentioned at the beginning of this episode, they have the family that goes by the thing that's named Clinton, and the kid asks him, is it named after the president?
Oh, yeah.
So this was early '99. So this was the right in the throes of the Monica Lewinsky and Clinton impeachment and all that stuff.
Yeah, because the thought was, Joe and Bradley, that Ken Starr was sort of like had gone beyond his remit, and that he was looking for all kinds of dirt on the Democrats and Bill Clinton, and it looked like that he was not like a proper legal prosecutor. It looked like he was like being partisan, and so what should have been a legitimate investigation sort of just became like portrayed as a witch hunt.
Yeah, he later became the president or chancellor or something like that of Baylor University, down in our neck of the woods in Texas.
Oh, Baylor.
I felt the scenes with this guy, this Star guy, and just a random picture of Megyn Kelly. Sometimes I like to throw random pictures in.
She looks like a lizard.
Ooh!
Was that?
She is.
Do you mean she looks like a lizard in that picture, or she looks like a lizard in general?
That picture, the skin looks a little fake.
Well, yeah.
Wait, somebody on television with fake-looking skin? Say it ain't so.
Well, she is in her 40s. I think she does good for her age, Megyn Kelly.
But also like a lizard who looks good for her age. Those aren't mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're showing your type, Joe.
Diana on V was a pretty
Anyway.
cool-looking lizard.
Yeah, so that good-looking black woman there, Shepherd, there was the reason I bring that up is because the lesbian said to her, "Why ain't you a tall glass of lemonade?" And I thought that was a good line.
Yeah, and Munch's line about Detective Cutie Pie.
Yeah, and then she said something like, "Can you open up a window? It's kind of smelling with all these dicks in here." Something like that.
Yeah.
And so she looked like an ESTP kind of lesbian, and she was certainly aggressive.
Russian is not ESTP.
Not exclusively. Naughty Ben. I shouldn't have said that. Although if you want to hear an ESTP, you can hear him in the background. Yeah, I felt that what is he called, Waterston? I think he could have acted a little bit better in those scenes, where he is protesting his right to wanted to keep his witness.
You mean the actual grand jury scene?
Yeah, I mean the actual actor wasn't.
Man, I thought he was great. That was like the best part of the episode to me.
I just felt a little bit under par. He's not exactly the same level as Yaphet Kotto. And,
well, I don't know. My perspective may be different because I've been watching all the Law and Order episodes. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of episodes where he's kind of being indignant about stuff and self-righteous, where he's not really right about what he's doing, or he's being really annoying about it. This was one of those episodes where he was in the right.
Yeah.
And he did a good job of, like, his usual kind of way of doing that can get annoying because it's like he doesn't there's no leeway, in his thinking. He's always like, I'm just right about everything. And in this case, it was actually it was more justified, and the performance was really good, I think. And actually, the independent counsel guy was better than I had remembered him. I remember thinking that he wasn't that great, and then I saw it again. I'm like, he was actually pretty good overall.
Yeah, it was pretty good, the counsel guy, yeah. I mean, it wasn't like when they had that previous episode when it was Law and Order, where they had that sort of like comedy lawyer, like appealing to racial prejudice.
Right.
Do you think that guy, the character that Waterston plays, do you think he's ENTP? What type do you think he is? Because we know that Munch is. We'll talk about in a moment.
No, I think he's an F. But it's tough to say. He's tough to type because he has elements, which I guess to say he's well-rounded enough. But there's certain things that kind of like may lean in certain directions, but they contradict each other. So, and part of that may just be the writing.
Yeah.
But some of his reputation is almost like an STP kind of character because, he's like the motorcycle riding guy and has this reputation of being a ladies' man, and getting involved with his assistants and things like that, and being kind of reckless. But on the other hand, he's really like passionate about causes, more so than you would expect from an STP type person. So.
I mean, you mentioned their contradictions. In Aristotle's Poetics, he actually wrote that if a character is inconsistent, he should be consistently inconsistent, because there are these people with contradictions.
Yeah, well, he has. It's really tough because he has his moments where he almost seems NF, but then his like lack of respect for certain. I mean, he doesn't seem like a cooperator. So I don't know. It's tough. It's like if he's an NF, then he's got to be one that's like really not strong with the cooperation abilities or whatever you want to call it. So at least in what they choose to focus on.
Yeah, because that's one of these things that's an interesting dichotomy, Joe, that you get in where you can clearly see how SJ is a cooperative, but when Kersey listed NFs as cooperative, I thought, well, a lot of the times, not so much, and they go with what they feel is right. But then Jeff explained it to me, like the nuances of it, like, and part of it is that they want everybody else to sort of like get with their program, like, and they want other people to come to their agenda.
Yeah, so when he first came on the show, and McCoy replaced the previous prosecutor, Ben Stone, and they very much tried to make him a contrast where he was like the rebellious, do whatever it takes to win the case kind of guy, whereas Ben Stone was passionate as well, but I think he was a guardian, but I think he was a feeler guardian. But he was very traditional in a lot of the ways he looked at things. He was like this old school Catholic guy and stuff, and McCoy was supposed to be kind of a contrast in that he came in and was like more of the reckless, rebellious type, but he's also kind of more of a crusader, so it's kind of hard to tell, even after all these episodes I've seen him in.
So, I mean, part of the thing is, so we've got typology, but we've also got writing theory where a lot of people are attracted to characters who are flawed and have these contradictions. And Robert McKee actually defines, he's a screenwriting guru, he actually defines a character dimension as a contradiction. So I can give you an example. If a character can be both cruel and kind, but it's like you have to set up situations in they were like kind to certain people under certain. So if you think of a mobster where they're like kind to their family, and then situations where they're cruel to certain other people, and so you can design a cast around somebody to bring out different elements of their personality, how they interact with different people, and so you can so all of these different people will see different sides of somebody. I don't know. Did you ever watch The Sopranos, Jeff?
I did not.
Okay.
Sorry, I actually haven't watched a lot of stuff.
Well, you're quite young. I mean, you've not had time to watch quite a lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, if you start talking about more recent stuff, I haven't watched most of it either. Most
That's
of what I have
probably-
watched is like what we're talking about now. Late '90s is like among the more recent stuff I've watched.
Yeah, I was born in '94, so.
I mean, I watched
I was-
some things after that, but not much. Like it was basically like some shows that started in the late '90s, I kept watching into the new decade, and then when they ended, that was it. There's very few things that started since then that I actually watched that much. I
That's
guess
fair. Yeah,
Everwood.
most of my stuff comes from Hulu and Netflix now.
What we can do now is talk about the highlight of the episode for me, and that's John munching his FBI file.
Well, there wasn't much to it, but that was kind of the joke.
Yep.
Mhm.
Where?
We had, I think Morgan mentioned too, we had, a previous homicide episode where Munch, it kind of implied that, when there was some kind of hang up with their background check to them getting the bar, that everybody thought it was going to be about Munch's record or, being like a subversive or, war protester or whatever. And then it turned out to be that Bayless was the one that had a blemish on his record. So Morgan said they used that joke again, basically by having Munch being like, they're not going to let us in here because of my previous stuff. And then they let him in, and then. Okay.
But
You're talking too quiet, so they can't hear you.
Okay.
Well. Okay, well. I mean, I have a vague recollection of what you're talking about, but I'm not going to try to say everything you just said. So anyway, yeah, he told me he was referring to something else. But anyway, there's been more than one time in the past that Munch has implied that his previous doings were going to cause a problem to him, and it hasn't. So that was what I was trying to say.
And this is Munch is an example of somebody where he's a type, where ENTP, but there's a big non-typological factor which is a bit more NF-y, but it has to do with his era. So, for example, he was a protester against the Vietnam War, and people would think, "Oh, that's a bit," but that was so. These things that were around him might sort of like give him some qualities that some might think, or that people might tag as more NF, but it's just because he grew up in that era where he was, and apparently he ran a sort of like just a sort of a student magazine protesting against the Vietnam War.
Well, I don't know if I construe political activism as NF-y because NTPs are
well, I mean, anti-war.
But even so, NTPs are like well known for their political activism and their interest in like historical facts and events. So I think politics is just as much NT as NF. And in terms of like in terms of ethics and politics, I think NTs can easily just as easily become NF-ish. Just sort of like how NFs can be in science and math. NTs can and are involved in politics and are very into ethics and treating people right.
But what it might be with, say, Munch is that when it has to do with things that are involved in his era and things that personally affected him, he will have like a clear moral opinion. Like he has a clear moral opinion on the Vietnam War. But then when it's like other things, he's a bit more ENTP-ish. Do you think that's fair, Jeff, or do you think there's like more of a consistent ethics with him?
I don't think there's anything that contradictory in an ENTP being anti-war.
Oh no, I was just saying that with him that era, well, like when we had that storyline between Garty, and Munch, where the impact of the Vietnam War on both of those characters was quite big. And so, just an example of something that goes beyond type that can affect somebody. And Munch was affected by his friend dying in Vietnam, and so that that made him extra against the war. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been, probably plenty of things written before about certain movements and, what types of people were within them and, why they were members. And we've talked a little bit before about, like, the 60s kind of hippie movement and things like that, and, like, who was among those. And, I think even with Kersey Jr., said that the total number of people involved in that, the highest percentage was probably artisans, just because there's more of us than there are intuitive types. But the NFs were the ones that were like the real crusaders of the cause or whatever. But there were plenty of NTs, I'm sure, a smaller percentage, but the ones that were still involved in that had their own reasons for being a part of that. It may not all have been the same reasons, but
and part of the SP reasons might have been, especially for male SPs, it might be a good way to get women. That to join the move.
I mean, you're around a bunch of people that are like, free love for everybody. Like, oh yeah, I'm down with that, sure.
Yeah, and they'll pretend to be more liberal than what they actually are.
Well, yeah, because we're the more malleable ones. It's about the situation, not a bigger cause. So.
Oh yeah, Jeff.
It's about what we can get out of the situation.
Yeah, Jeff, you could tell Joe your line comparing ESFPs and ENFPs.
I'm curious.
Which line is that?
The one where ESFPs are just like ENFPs, except.
What?
You have a line that starts with ENFPs are just like ESFPs.
You got put on the spot, my man.
I know what the punchline is. Okay, I'll say it.
He does that all the time to me, but I think he's talking about me saying that ENFPs are like ESFPs. He said it backwards, so that's why.
Oh, sorry.
Except they believe in stuff.
True.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted Jeff to say his own line.
Because you're sick of saying them for him.
No, because I wanted him to have the full credit. I wanted him to and also he's got better delivery than me.
I was about to say, because Ben has no sense of time.
No, I have no memory either, so I get all mixed up. I have it written out.
So if you don't remember, you just make it up anyway. So I'm used to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes I'll have like these subjunctive quotes where I'll say something as a quote if I actually said it.
But you'll remember such a vague thing from whatever the story was, so you'll just be like, can you tell that story about the broken baseball bat? And I'll be like, what are you talking about? Because it turns out that was like 1/400th of the story had anything to do with a broken baseball bat. But that's the part Ben remembered for some reason.
But then there was one hangout where it was like you said afterwards, oh, I'm glad you reminded me to say those things.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your attempts to credit me with my amazing, hilarious statements from the past.
It's like the one to go to your greatest hits. Now already I've shown Joe though your MBTI preferences joke. I don't know if you've watched it yet. Have you watched it yet, Joe?
Not a video. I have all the the charts that you've sent me though.
Because I sent because I had that video, Jeff's classic MBTI joke. If you've not watched it yet, Jeff could say the joke now.
Oh yeah, if you please go ahead if you want to say the joke. I'll probably watch it after this.
No, she's
Okay.
NT, so I don't take offense. The charts are more important.
Yeah, so Jeff, it's that joke about the closeness of your scores on the different scales. Do you want to say that?
No.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
you're doing such a horrible job setting me up in that you're going to make me look
That
bad.
is a pretty bad setup.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try again.
It's like, oh wait, and then 10 years ago, you remember that joke about the celery? You want to tell that one? No, I don't.
Good.
Yeah. So basically, Jeff was going through. It was just the strength of his preferences, where E and I was pretty close. S and N was sort of like, it would be favoured S, but it was like 12-8 towards F. And he had a huge preference for feeling and a huge preference for perceiving. So if you think about it, he's defined by his F and penis.
You're not the best at joke setup, but I do think you're funny. I do think
Okay.
he talks very highly of your hilarity, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
All right.
See,
well,
that's the thing is, I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. And Ben just tells it anyway. Like,
Yeah, but you didn't want to say it, so
Ben, you don't know how to read the comedy mood, and so he tried to tell you, nah, and you did it anyway. And guess how many laughs you got out of it? None.
well, I saw the
The
reaction.
crickets didn't even chirp. You had nothing.
Telling it how it is. All right. So back to this episode.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I don't remember when's the last time we even talked about it, so I don't remember what we were talking about. But I will say it really made me appreciate Homicide more because I forgot how much Law & Order was procedure oriented, and it was I forgot how much you really had to pay attention to what was going on in the plot because like if you zoned out for and I also remember back when I used to watch Law & Order a lot, and I used to like really be into the story and the characters. I remember my brother was like, "Yeah, I can't always be focused on the story all the time. It's like if I zone out for a second, then you miss the story completely." And at the time, I was like, "What are you talking about?" I find it's easy to follow. But having not watched it for a few years and having coming back to it, I really got what he meant by you can't just sort of tune out. You always have to be focused all the time, otherwise you miss like critical story elements, and you're like completely lost. So really, I mean, not to say that it's a bad thing, but it really made me appreciate the way Homicide sort of breaks up the story and the case with personal conversation. So I think that's
agree,
another.
though I have to say that this episode I did like the fact that they referenced some past developments on Law & Order episodes. It wasn't entirely self-contained because they referred to 3 different of Jack McCoy's previous ADAs, including 2 that he was involved with and 1 that was killed in a car accident. So we did get some references to some previous stories that if you actually been watching Law & Order, then you would know what they were talking about. So.
That's not actually what I was referring to. I was referring to just the whole the nature of the dialogue of the whole episode was very mostly case centric, and it did take some times like with Shepard and Benjamin Bratt's character. I don't remember his name in the show, but like there's some elements like that where and Munch and again I completely forgot the Law & Order names, but there were some elements of it which were like non-case related. But what I meant to say is that
yeah, I said I
does a
agree
really
with
good
you
job.
on that. I was just saying I liked the previous references to the stories, that it wasn't just everything was introduced in this episode. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, he loves
I'm
that.
sorry,
Jeff loves
not,
internal references.
yeah, but also I'm not used to more type talk, but I'm not used to you thinking without not in the current context. So I was like, oh, so did he misunderstand me, or is he mentioning something else? Because I'm not sure if you're aware that I was like in any transcontextual thing that you sort of did there. And because me being intuitive, thinking I'm smarter than I am, it's like, oh, Jeff couldn't possibly be using intuition. So that might have been.
No, I wasn't. I was just saying I agreed with you, and then saying that there was an element that I liked that was in the episode that was sort of similarly related.
Yeah. So it's similar, but not the same thing. So that was my own. That was my own.
Yeah.
I'm stupid intuitive.
Yeah, that's the thing. Whereas NPs are more likely to do the complex equivalence thing and say, "Oh, that's the same thing," and SPs and anybody else is likely to say, "No, it's apples and oranges."
Exactly, but it didn't even occur to you that it was different. So that's my own bias, my own fault.
I'm just saying that
I mean, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just was saying that there was the other element that they did have that was not exactly typical of Law and Order episode that I thought was good. So it was closer to Homicide in the fact that they were actually acknowledging things that had happened on previous episodes, even if it didn't have the character development that Homicide would have.
Right.
So one of the things,
and to answer Ben's written question, ADA is Assistant District Attorney.
Yes, thought so. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things with the Munch in his FBI file is that sometimes Munch lies or exaggerates. So like he talked. So he was always like talking up how much of a 60s radical he was. And then there's other times where he exaggerates for the sake of an argument.
I think he actually believed that he was doing like really bad things at the time. I think it's like an egocentric thing where he actually thought he was this terrible person when people didn't even know that he was doing all these things.
Oh no, he was proud of it though.
Yeah, I know. He was proud of it, but he actually doesn't know like he thought it had a bigger effect than he actually did.
Yeah, but it's like I can understand that from a libertarian point of view, where it's like the government and because there is a libertarian aspect to Munch, where some of the things he says about the federal government is like what a libertarian would say, and like he's not happy with them having records on people. So his politics seem to be a combination of liberal and libertarian.
But
what to say about Munch?
So let me finish my thing though, because I was gonna say that I really did I think the scene with McCoy and the guy who was attacking him in the actual courtroom. I really that's one thing that Law & Order is really good for. It's really good for like the actual courtroom drama with him sort of being dragged through the mud by someone completely dragging up some mostly unrelated things. I mean, it was related in that he was trying to basically assassinate his character on the stand, but the way he did it, and McCoy saying, "Have you no shame?" The whole I really enjoyed that scene because I don't know, it's just really well done, and it really. I sort of knew that it was sort of tagged on for dramatic effect, but I really didn't care because it was so well done that I thought it didn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's good.
Yeah, but I really did enjoy. I really like that about Law & Order. Okay, a bit redundant, but yeah, I just really like the scene.
I did too, and I also have to say that line makes me think another case for McCoy not being SP, because I don't think an SP would have asked him, did he have any shame?
Right. Yeah, but those are my two big things about the episode. Is that basically it's a Law & Order episode, not a Homicide episode, I'm trying to say. And it's good to see a Law & Order episode because I haven't seen it in a while. But yeah, I like the episode.
Oh, they had the one thing that Jeff might have been annoyed by. Were you annoyed, Jeff, by like the scenes between Shepard and Benjamin Bratt talking about her looks and stuff?
Not particularly, but it was sort of a, just the cynic in me is just, it's another one of those little, oh, well, when they picked who crossed over, they had to include her because they were trying to be like, oh, we've got a more attractive detective now, everybody, from the last time. And even had him say the line about, I got Falzone and this is an upgrade or something like that. And then him just saying, I meant you were taller,
Savage.
So, yeah, I mean, it didn't bother me. It just was just a reminder of, that it was a reminder that we've dropped a bit in terms of the first crossover where you had Pimbleton and Bayless, and it seemed much cooler than having. Not that I don't like Munch being part of it, but it's like Shepard just seems out of place.
It's just that we're judging her against the really high standards, Joe,
I know,
of like
yeah,
Pemberton.
I really am.
I mean, she's a
And I'm
pretty
not
good
saying-
actress.
Yeah, and again, I'm not faulting the actress. I really don't think she's bad. It's just the character is so empty. and so very obviously like forced by the network to, oh, you need this attractive female character, as opposed to having much substance or depth to her at all. Like, and that's the sad part, is that the homicide writers are capable of doing that because they've already shown they could do it with Howard, and then to a certain extent with Ballard. It's taken a while, but it started to get at least a little insight into Ballard. But Shepard is just like, they almost never really cracked the surface with her. So,
Yeah.
And of course on Law and Order, you're certainly not going to get any of that. She's just going to be generic female Detective X,
Because part of the thing, Joe, is that Law and Order is like, it's trying to get two shows in one, because you've got the actual police work and then you've got all the stuff in the courts room. And so they're a little bit pressed for time.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, when you compare the shows, Homicide's always going to be better at the cop part. I mean, for the most part. There are rare exceptions, like, where Homicide has a lower quality episode, like the one we discussed a few weeks ago, homicide.com. But other than that, the cop parts, Homicide's better, but they don't have the courtroom aspects that Bradley mentioned, where Law and Order, yeah, that's really their bread and butter. That's what separates them from other cop shows, because it's not really what most cop shows do. You have some cop shows that do have courtroom scenes occasionally, but it's not every episode like that.
Mhm.
And when actual cops and lawyers have been asked about, how realistic is Law and Order, it's more so for the lawyers than it is for the cops. And pretty much everybody admits that the talk between the lawyers is very realistic. And real lawyers say, this is often how lawyers talk to each other. With, certain aspects, like Ben mentioned earlier, being accepted, like, explaining immunity when they obviously know what that is. But in terms of the way they rattle off case law and precedents and make deals and stuff, those things are very similar. As well, also, I like another thing is people have said the way that Law and Order portrays judges as rather than always being the super serious formal acting types you often see on TV shows, like the judge is this revered thing. On Law and Order, often they're treated very much like they have their own personalities, and the lawyers are figure out, how do we best work this judge, because we know what this judge is likely to go for or not go for, and things like that. More of that kind of thing is explored, and that kind of stuff is the strength of Law and Order, as opposed to the cop parts or any kind of real character development.
Do they go into
I can also
Joe?
appreciate
Go on.
accuracy.
Yeah, go on, Joe.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to just say I always appreciate accuracy, especially your note about the judges. Just because a lot of recent cases, just of pretty much anything, like I've been starting to kind of take notice of the way you'll see judge just in different news cases and stories, like react and like the quotes you find from them. So that's just it. I just kind of liked it. Was agreeing? Yes.
I think
Sorry,
in the UK they try to be a bit more, give the impression of not being partisan. I think in the United States that the judges are appointed like in a partisan fashion.
It's
like,
extremely partisan, and they make it very well known. And you'll see like one judge with one case might be very conservative and like lets give someone a lenient sentence, and then another it's like you're getting 20 to life for something really similar because like I disagree. It's really weird.
even beyond, their actual judicial philosophies, though, what you see on Law and Order that you don't often see on other TV shows that have portrayed judges as being sort of formal, revered people. Whatever. You'll see like a plea agreement being discussed while the judge is eating a sandwich. Things like that they'll have where people that are really working, in courtrooms have said, these are the little details that Law and Order gets right, that you'd have these kind of scenes that they don't usually show you. Where often these important legal things are being discussed while people, meanwhile, are trying to get on with their lives and get their lunch break in and things like that.
Yeah, those details really do make it, and it's hard to. It's one of those things that you really wouldn't think about it until someone points it out to you. At least in my case, I wouldn't. But now that you've said that, I'm gonna go and watch episodes, and I'm gonna notice that every time I watch something. Those little details.
Well, it's that access that you don't, because in my experience in courtrooms is pretty limited, and it's only been, I guess thankfully for the most part that I haven't had to deal with courtrooms. But when I have, it's very much only the parts that it's this is what the public is allowed to participate in for this period of time. But I don't see the behind the scenes stuff. I've never.
Mm-hmm.
The only time I've ever been with a judge in their office was when my parents got divorced, and I was there giving what was considered official testimony, even though it was in the judge's office and the lawyers were present. But, that's a little different than what you see often on Law and Order, even though it is something official, but it's like the lawyers in there discussing with the judge, and you can see sort of the different personality aspects in terms of which judges will allow more discussion or more kind of back and forth with the lawyers, and then which ones cut it off much faster. I don't want to hear all this stuff. There was, another show I saw recently. It was a Knots Landing episode where they had a courtroom scene where it was like the pretrial hearing, which was a different judge, obviously, than what was going to be the trial judge. And at one point, he tells the lawyers, "Save your grandstanding for superior court." So I thought that was a good line, because he's like, "I don't want to hear that. Just tell me the facts so I can decide whether I'm passing this case on."
Jeff, could you give some examples of how you think certain temperaments, or based just how personality affects the judge? A certain personality might do this as a judge, or
well, I mean, obviously, as we were talking about earlier, when it comes to certain types being more prone to causes, I mean, that obviously would apply to judges too. You have more activist judges, and you have judges that are very much stick to the facts and previous case law, and don't try to get me to legislate from the bench kind of thing, So obviously, that's a contrast that I wouldn't say that it's like cut and dried N versus S, because I don't think necessarily all N's are activist judges or all S's wouldn't be, but it's probably a little bit more likely that the N's are going to be seeing things in terms of how can this ruling improve the system or things like that, because they tend to have that type of thinking of what's because we've talked about that many times before, is that they view things in terms of systems and improving systems, as opposed to.
Which temperament was that? I missed part of that.
Well, intuitives in general.
Okay.
Are more likely to see things as systems and ways to improve systems, as opposed to censors are looking more at the facts of what does the law actually say about this, or and I think even with SP versus SJ, you're gonna have SJ judges, or it's more about things like, they use phrases like debt to society, and it's about you're supposed to, because it's about, there's an image level there where this is what you're supposed to appear to be, and the recent jury duty experience I had, that judge sounded very guardian, and he gave this little speech that was completely unnecessary at the beginning about the value of jury service and how it's right up there with serving in the military and things like that, and so that's the kind of thing that you're going to hear from an SJ judge, for an SP judge, then you can go like Harry Stone from Night Court and see magic tricks. I don't know. Anyway. But I think an SP judge is probably more likely to, they are going to be more factual, but they're less of the type to be the, I'm not going to allow any kind of thing that isn't traditional in my courtroom. they might be have a little bit more leeway on that kind of thing because they are trying to enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
If they're still trying to conduct a trial, but so I think Judge Ito, the famous O.J. Simpson trial jury, he was probably an SP because he let them get away with way more than I think an S.J. judge would have.
Yeah, and plus that guy that defended O.J. Simpson, he was a great lawyer. Do you think he was SP?
Well, that's the thing
Jeff?
is I think that Ito was probably sitting there. He was entertained enough by this that he was like, I'm going to let this go because otherwise I'm not going to get through this thing. I've got to have something fun to happen here.
Because he was I've forgotten his name, but there was a Seinfeld character based on him called Jackie Childs.
Yeah. So here we go with the meta references, Ben. Since you're like, okay, Jackie Childs is played by Phil Morris.
Yes, he was a friend of the guy
who is who's on the '80s version of Mission Impossible, and is the son of the actor who played the character's father on the original '60s Mission Impossible.
You see, Bradley, he could do the associative thinking. He's done it more than me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yes, Johnny Cochran was the actual lawyer's name that you were talking about, that Jackie Childs was very obviously based on. So yeah, there's some cross references there.
And there was that bit where he said, "If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit."
Yeah. Johnny Cochran was definitely a good example of an SP lawyer for sure.
Because what happened was, OJ probably did it, but they also planted evidence on him, and so
you saw the worst aspects of everything in that case, from the way cops botch an investigation to the way that all the courtroom dramatics and showmanship that has nothing to do with the actual facts of the case. There's a reason why they keep making movies and shows about that case, because there was so much to look at in so many of those aspects that took place and all of that. But anyway, does anyone have anything else to say about this episode?
I'm just having fun listening in.
Oh, good.
Well, I guess
when you watch them in the future, hopefully you can, because we've not got many episodes left. It's a pity that Bradley and you joined us so late.
Well, one idea, and we can talk about this later, of course, is that, if anybody else goes back and watches the, show from the beginning after we're done or whatever, and then, or maybe goes back and watches our reviews or anything, we could always do sort of a video in the future revisiting some of the past episodes. If anybody else wanted to do that or wanted to be involved, we could kind of say, how did our opinions match up with theirs when they saw it or something like that. Just an idea.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind for sure.
So, Bradley, have you got any thoughts on this? Any more thoughts on this episode?
No, not really.
All right, time to go to our ratings, I guess.
Ooh. Man, I'll sort of... I think I'll give it about 7.5. Can I give it a half, Jeff?
It's your rating. You can give it a 7.364 if you want to.
Well, I'm not quite that into. I'll give it like a 7.5. Yeah.
All right. I'll give it. I guess for context, I'm gonna treat this as a Law and Order episode and not a Homicide episode. So I won't compare it to other Homicide episodes. I'll just give it what I think as a Law and Order episode. And I gave it. I'll give it an 8. A solid 8 because I thought it was good. It wasn't over the top, but it was still interesting. So I think I give it an 8.
I would say the only thing that keeps me from giving it an 8 was what Bradley actually mentioned earlier about the way that they kind of rattle off stuff and in a way that if you like tune out for just a second, then you kind of lose some of the facts of it and stuff. And I did sort of tune out, so it could just be I was too tired. But either way, I still, it didn't quite have the snap that some of them have in terms of something that held my attention the whole time. There was a little bit of a lull a couple of times in it to me. So, and I thought it was a little bit sensationalistic in the fact that they were like trying to make it there's this aspect of homosexuality that we're going to complicate the case with, and it kind of for shock value, if you know what I mean. Like it seemed like at that time that was probably more what they were going for, because it's going to be this huge embarrassing thing to this government official, and that was the twist they put in there. And if that's your twist, it's really not that interesting. So anyway, I would give it a 7, and I think if I remember right, that was what I gave the first crossover. The second one might have even given a 6. I can't remember because it wasn't as good. But anyway, so yeah, this one gets a 7. So that's it for the Law and Order side. And join us next week for when we finish the story on Homicide with an episode also entitled Sideshow.
Now, what I can say, because Joe's not seen the episode, what I can ask her is, how do you review this hangout, Joe? What do you give that out of 10?
I would say like a solid 8. I mean, it's pretty laid back, and I like that everyone tends to sort of almost take turns talking, so it's not a big mishmash of digital interference over one another. And you graciously include me in the conversation, so there you go. It's very yeah.
Cool. That's what we shoot for. We haven't always been as good at that, but I think we're, it's the more people do hangouts with each other, kind of they learn each other's habits a little bit, and maybe start to work together more. When Ben and I first started doing hangouts, there was probably a lot more than that. Now we've done hundreds of videos with each other, so it's
literally,
we've kind of gotten our style down pretty well.
I would hope you'd have gotten it down by then.
Yeah. Which
And
is
obviously-
demonstrated by Ben's amazing retelling of jokes of mine from the past that didn't have much to
that
do
was
with what
great.
we were talking about.
Well, if you watch the video, he does it a lot better. So, bye-bye, folks, and we'll continue
Bye.
to chat off air.
Right.